He has been involved in teaching, research, and outreach in the areas of tribal issues like social work with tribal perspectives and working with groups like social welfare administration and participatory project managements like climate change and migration and biodiversity, indigenous knowledge system and well-being, etc. He has written several academic articles and reports for government and non-government organizations. He has been conducting need assessment and impact assessment of corporate social responsibility, that is CSR projects of different industries. With the exposure to the higher education abroad, with the collaborations, visiting professorships and exchange programs with several European universities like in Sweden, Finland, Germany, Czech, Poland, Spain, Norway, USA, etc. He has facilitated the internationalizations of social work education at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He was Wackenstad International Speaker at CSWE APM 2024 at Kansas City of Missouri of USA. He has been member of professional associations of social work like Odisha Professional Social Workers Association, National Association of Professional Social Workers in India, International Consortium for Social Development, and currently holding the office of Associate Secretary General, founding member, and one of the national coordinators of Tribal Intellectual Collective India. As a dean, he has provided academic leadership for the excellence to the School of Social Work at Tata Institute of Social Sciences to continue its position on top for consecutively 3 years in a row by bagging the best college in social work in India by the ranking of India Today group from 22 to 24, and also bagged the Award of Excellence for Institutional Social by FICCI 2023. With his leadership at TIS, he has designed and rolled out the curriculum of the new 4 years BSW program with the NEP framework in 2023. With this brief, I welcome immediately Professor Bipin Jojo sir to this online lecture session on behalf of all the participants through online and also on behalf of the University of Mysore and also on behalf of the MFT Center, Mysore. Over to Bipin sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this kind introduction and inviting me for this particular session as part of
excuse me, sir. Sir, not audible, sir.
Sir, could you please raise the volumes a little bit?
Yeah, okay.
Somebody told it's not audible.
Am I audible?
Dear participants, anyone, please reply.
Yes, sir. Not clear. It is audible but very low voice.
Okay, if some are audible, some are able to hear me, and some are not, probably adjust.
Okay.
Sir, voice tumba kadme doorದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿದೆ.
Sir, please raise the voice a little bit, sir. I mean, our volume, please raise the system volume.
Yeah, I have put my
Is it, sir?
Full.
Is it, sir? Okay, okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
Good, sir. Good, sir. No, good, sir.
My vocal volume might also go up.
Please, sir. Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let me acknowledge in the beginning itself and say that I'm trying to share my understanding, my thoughts, my ideas with you. You can always disagree with me, and it is nothing that whatever I say is perfect, because we are all colleagues teaching different university, colleges, different higher education institutions. So it is basically share our idea and our thoughts and exchange our ideas. We can discuss, we can talk around the ideas what I'm going to share. I have shared with the organizers about my title. I'm going to share my screen. Hope it is. I'll make it true. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. We can see, sir, but it's not full. Like slideshow, you have to select.
Yeah. It is fine now.
Not yet, sir. Full screen is not display.
Okay, but I have put on
Sir, in slideshow option is there, sir, full screen.
yeah.
You just click on.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think slides only.
Uh,
Sir, click on from, yeah, presentation view
mm.
or from current slide.
Is it visible? I'm using the slideshow mode.
Sir, click on from current slide.
Yes. Otherwise, somebody will have to share from other side also. Okay, I have. Sorry for this technical things. I will share my PPT also with Dr. Swamidas. If PPTs. Yeah, I have shared my PPT with Dr. Daswami also. So if you can share. Okay. Can you share from your side if anyone can share from your side? Yeah. So if possible, I have shared my screen. Oh, sorry, I have shared my PPT. So if somebody can share from your end, I'm going to share with Professor Jyotish also. Is indigenous knowledge systems perspectives from within. As this FDP is on IKS, I think I thought of using this topic, which I have often spoken in different occasions and different seminars, conferences. So I thought, let me improvise and share my thoughts on this. This is around indigenous knowledge system, and which is part of, which could be contextualized in the larger discussion around IKS. Now, how do we look at any knowledge? Any knowledge, how do we draw? How do we evolve? And I according to me, the knowledge we create, it comes from our lenses, our worldview. And this worldview has different layers. The worldview gets influenced with our values, with our relationships, with people, our environment. That determines our behavior. Okay, so the value we draw, or the value systems we carry, that is what determines our relationship with our nature, our environment, or with society, and also how we behave. And as Radcliffe says the worldview affects one's own values, and the individual values in turn affect the sociocultural relationships, which in turn determines one's actions or behavior, which is what we actually see when we view a person. Okay, and what are those elements of this worldview? This worldview in the philosophy of social sciences or philosophy of knowledge, one hear about this word epistemology, ontology, epistemology. I think it is very commonly used word. And what is this epistemology? Epistemology basically how we can know what we know, the whole methodology of knowing. And it also looks at around the nature of reality, about the thing being, and that gets connected, related with the whole cosmology, understanding the whole universe around which the thing we are or we have, and the way we want to understand that thing or that being or that reality. And so this whole process of knowing and understanding also is determined based on how we look at, whether we look at beyond ourselves, whether we look at in relation to others or in relation to someone, okay, which is often known or called as teleology, and the whole belief systems, theology, the belief systems, which describes how we believe on our existence, on our nature of supreme being or spirituality. And then comes the whole anthropology of studying about human beings or the society. And based on that, we also attribute that what is good, what is bad, what is ethics. Okay, so axiology comes in. So a whole lot of these ideas revolve around the worldview. If you look at this picture, now the two people see this number written on the floor, and for the person who is standing on the left might see as 6, and the person standing on the right might say that it is 9. Okay, now how do we decide who is right or wrong? Two people are there, but there is only one number. So if we decide who is right and wrong, it is very difficult because both of them are right. But based on that location, based on where they stand, I think it changes. And that's what exactly I'm trying to put across in my sharing, that location or the worldview or the lenses we use changes a particular thing different. One might say, no, it is 6. The other might say that, no, it is 9. And both of them are correct. Only difference is where they stand. The location, that determines the lens, that determines the perspective. Okay, so the way we look at, the way we locate ourselves, the perspective we carry, I think that changes the reality. And so when we discuss or when we talk about local and indigenous knowledge, and there is a program with UNESCO, local and indigenous knowledge. And according to this UNESCO link project of the program, local and indigenous knowledge refers to the understandings, skills, and philosophies developed by societies with long histories of interaction with their natural surroundings. Okay, the societies which refer to their own understanding, skills, or philosophies which have evolved over the years based on their history, based on their interaction with their natural environment. This knowledge is integral part of their cultural complex and also encompass language, systems of classifications, resource use, practices, their interactions, rituals, and spirituality. This unique way of knowing are important facets of the world's cultural diversity and provide a foundation for locally appropriate sustainable development. This is how the UNESCO's local and indigenous knowledge explain about local and indigenous knowledge. And so what is indigenous knowledge? The knowledge, all indigenous knowledge, something originates with its manifestation in the society. It gets manifested in the society and also get authenticated by the society. So the knowledge which origins, manifests, and gets authenticated. It is a traditional knowledge because it is indigenous knowledge. It is developed over a time in any society or culture. It is a traditional knowledge. Okay, and the core of this indigenous knowledge is their indigenous worldview. As I said, the lenses, the location, which drives or which draws its sources or its lenses from its own value systems, the locations, the perspectives around which their whole natural relationship and the behavior gets determined. And so what are the characteristics of this indigenous knowledge? It is based on the personal knowledge of the experiences. And so it is unique to a person. It is unique to a particular society. It may not be universally accepted. So that it cannot be claimed universality because it is based on the personal experiences or the people of a particular group or the community have these common experiences. Okay, so I cannot promise you to tell you the truth, but I can tell you what I know. I cannot tell. It is truth for me. It may not be truth for you because based on my experiences, based on my community members, this is the truth. So there may not be one single truth universally. So it is because it is based on knowledge and the experience. Similarly, it is based on the integrity and the perception of the speaker. Okay, since I am talking or anybody in the community whose experiences we are referring to, now what is the integrity and the perception? So it is based on that person integrity. Can we believe? Can we do we have the confidence on his or her integrity? On what he is saying or she is saying? Okay, then the perception is personal, but wisdom is validated through collective analysis and consensus building. So even if it is my personal experiences, can the community or the group of people collectively validate? Yes, it is true. Yes, we also have similar experiences. Can we have consensus around that experiences? So the indigenous knowledge might be 1%, 2%, 3% experiences, but it gets validated. It gets consensus of the collective analysis, based on the collective analysis. Okay, and so it is embedded with oral traditions, and so it could be literal. It may not be written down. It is just in the form of stories, songs, folklore, folk stories, and it gets transferred with responsibility and obligation. It gets passed on from one generation to another generation, from one father to son or son to daughter or whatever the next person is. Okay, so and with sense of great responsibility and obligation that if this power or this knowledge I transfer to another person, that integrity remains. The integrity remains with the same integrity what I have. So that kind of confidence one has to have. And also the other person has that kind of responsibility. Like, for example, the spiritual power. The people who have the spiritual power or have the responsibility to mediate or interact with our deities or spiritual powers, medicines. Okay, many times this medicinal naturopathy, some of the plants and everything are so rich knowledge, but it is not acquired by everyone. So the people who have this knowledge, they pass it on to their disciples or their sons or daughters, most of the time daughters, sons, but sometimes with the women's side, daughters. And they pass on to the next person, next generation. So when they pass it on, there is a great sense of responsibility that they will use it very responsibly. This knowledge is also experiential. It is subjective, it is qualitative in character rather than objective and quantitative. Okay, but our experiences are very subjective. As I said, it is my experiences, another person's experiences, probably another person's or a group of peoples in the community or the people in a place, probably it is their experiences. But these experiences could be very subjective. So we may not be able to objectively verify and quantify. Okay, and based on that, they evolve their own indigenous epistemology. Okay, and this is something kind of holistic knowledge where everything is alive and everyone is related. So it connects everybody's life, everybody's experiences. Okay, so it cannot be in isolation. It is connected with its own relationship with human beings, flora and fauna. Okay, so when we are talking about indigenous knowledge system, now the word indigenous could be debatable, contested. I'm not getting into that debate, but I'm often referring to the international definition or understanding which relates with the groups or the communities in Indian context referred as tribes or Adivasis. So I like to bring in kind of the discourse around the tribal or indigenous perspectives, which I try to put it broadly around three perspectives. So first, starting with the imperialist perspective or imperial perspectives, which were colonial perspective, which starts with their law of 1873, Government of India Act 1935, which tries to identify certain areas of tribal populated habitated area in the country as areas of the communities as isolated. Okay, so the people who are isolated, the communities which are isolated, and so they need certain kind of spatial administration or certain ways of dealing or administering with these people or these areas. So the colonial perspective comes from this imperialist perspective. After independence, that continues with the nation state perspective, which the people who were considered or found isolated, the nation state perspective tries to assimilate with the larger majority people of the country and try to absorb them, try to bring them into the larger traditions or bigger traditions or mainstream society, okay, or the bigger dominant culture. And along with the assimilation, there was an attempt to integrate them, where finding the midway that they could be protected from any kind of exploitative measures and also added with the development measures like health, education, housing, etc., etc. So in one hand, they are brought into the larger cultural context of the country and provided the protective and the development programs to be integrated with the larger nation state perspective. And the third perspective is the tribal perspective or indigenous perspective, which comes through their resistance from the tribal communities themselves, which comes from the assertion of their autonomy, assertion of their own self-determination. Okay, so I'll try to discuss about these aspects a little more, and starting with how do we see this imperialist perspective. Now I am referring to one of the indigenous scholar from New Zealand, where he talks that how the imperialism tries to colonize, okay, colonize and create colonies beyond their own home place. And in that process, they try to demolish the whole local or indigenous knowledge system. Okay, so because they try to imperialize, they want to expand their imperialism by acquiring their resources, capital, and in that process, they also try to subjugate the local communities and the people. And in that process, what happens is the local culture, traditions, indigenous knowledge systems gets destroyed and devastated. And that is why, in that context, the Linda Smith, who is indigenous scholars from New Zealand, uses in one of her books called Decolonizing Methodologies. She says the term research is linked to European imperialism and colonialism. Okay, and in another place in the same book, she says the word research probably one of the dirtiest words in the indigenous world's vocabulary. Okay, because this colonial imperialists, in the name of research, they try to frame the indigenous communities in a colonial place, wherever they went to colonize, they try to define from their worldview, from their own lenses. And very often you will find that indigenous people in the colonies were defined as primitive, savages, barbarous, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is why Linda Smith says probably the research is very dirty, probably dirtiest word for indigenous world, because that research, that colonial research or imperial research has tried to dehumanize the whole indigenous communities, tries to degrade their knowledge system, okay, and they try to portray in from their own lenses. Because the Western researchers and intellectuals can assume to know all that is possible to know of us. Okay, they assume that they know everything about us on the basis of their brief encounters with some of us. It appalls us that West can desire, extract, and claim ownership of our own ways of knowing, our imagery, the things we create and produce, and then simultaneously reject the people who created and developed these ideas and seek to deny them further opportunities to be creators of their own culture and their own nations. Linda Smith. Okay, so it is very powerful sentence. So based on their brief encounter, they assume that they know and they define and theorize based on whatever they understand, brief interactions and our appearances. They understand that they claim that they understand and demolish our knowledge, the way we understand, the way we live, and also deny them for further opportunities to create their own knowledge. Okay. Another scholar called Edward Said, some of you I'm sure must have read. Edward Said says that this process as Western discourse about other, that is, one who knows or claims to know about others who do not write, but the people who know, they write about the others. And that is why the whole of this othering process start. One who is knowledgeable, supposed to be knowledgeable, the other who is barbarous or primitive or uncivilized. So that is this kind of Western discourse which we claim so-called modern, developed, and primitive, backward, this kind of discourse, that othering process starts. And this othering process gets supported by institutions, universities, vocabulary, scholarships, imagery, doctrines, even colonial bureaucracies and colonial systems. Okay, so that colonial system created this kind of othering. And this continues. The colonial influences have generally failed to respect this indigenous knowledge. And this colonization is largely the Western knowledge system depicted their epistemology. This is their knowledge system imposed on the local knowledge system. They legitimized their knowledge systems and delegitimized the local knowledge system or indigenous knowledge system. And this gets transmitted through the legal, government, academic channels, which promoted patriarchy, promoted capitalism, and ecological destructive practices. And also, it constructed the hierarchy of superior and inferior knowledge. Okay? And thus, a superior and inferior people around the world. The people who were modern, the people who controlled, assumed themselves as a superior, and the people who were subjugated, people who were looked as uncivilized, were looked at as inferior, and so their knowledge, their culture seemed to be inferior around the world. And based on this, around the world, if we look at, there are different indigenous epistemologies emerging around the indigenous communities. And few examples I like to share. In Australia and New Zealand, they call it decolonizing methodology. Like I was saying, Linda Smith, she is from Maori indigenous community there, and she has written a book on decolonizing methodologies. One might find one, if you wish to read, it is available online freely. You can download it. So in Australia, New Zealand, one sees that how the methodology which has tries to capture us, tries to degrade us, how we can decolonize that methodology. Similarly, in the First Nation countries like in Canada, Mexico, they call it decolonial method. The scholar like Ramon Grosfugel writes decolonial method. In South America, that Latin America, they call it perspectivism, another point of view. The scholar like Eduardo Viveros de Castro writing talks about, like in African countries, indigenization of knowledge. Okay, this is written by this Chancellor Williams, his book. In Europe, even if they're largely, many of these European countries were colonizing around the world, even there, the alternative perspective emerging, saying that other than the dominant theory, there is an alternative theory emerging as the epistemology of South. That is wonderful reading by Boaventura de Souza Santos. I think if you could look at his book, there is an epistemology of South. Okay, our North, the global North, tries to impose, colonize a particular epistemology, and so there is the Boaventura talks about the epistemology of South. Okay, and so from this kind of global debate or the reality, now how do we see into our Indian context? Now, in our Indian context, that is the Indian nation state of India, as I said, the colonial Britishers looked at the tribes as isolation or isolationist approach they adopted during their colonial rule. And so in the post-independent India, Indian nation state tried to assimilate and integrate to this community of the people who were so-called isolated. And so what happened that we try to universalize, we try to bring in, integrated or assimilated with the larger dominant majority communities or the culture, and so universalize. Okay, and there is always this debate on this: can we universalize? Because there are so much of diversities. So can we universalize every diversity, every different kind of truths? There are also this debate around insider, outsider, the research of the knowledge systems. When we talk about the whose knowledge, who determines the knowledge, and so often we find this debate or the concept around this universal, particular to insider, outsider debate. And if you look at in Indian context about the tribes in India, this Kelkar and Lakur committee used this criteria to define the Indian tribes. or from the point of view of that how some of these communities called tribes or scheduled tribes can be helped or developed socially and educationally, how the social educational development can be done to be able to integrate or assimilate with the larger dominant society of the country. And so they identified the few characteristics or the criteria who are the people to be identified to be promoted or integrated or assimilated with the larger society. And they identify this criteria called indications of primitive traits, distinctive culture, geographical isolation, shyness of contact with community at large, backwardness. These are the 5 criteria used to define a group, a community, or subgroup or sub-community of a community, larger community, to be called as scheduled tribe in the country. Okay, now one can debate, one can discuss, and have different perspectives and ideas around this criteria. That really whether we have this people or this can be used as a criteria to determine as scheduled tribes. And many of the scholars, dominant Indian scholars, have tried to theorize around this whole idea of assimilation, isolation to assimilation and integration through different kind of scholars writing one can come across, either starting with the colonial anthropologist called Very Relvin, to G.S. Gore, to N.K. Bose, to Kosami, to Vidyarthi, Ray Burman, Jagannath Vati, Andre Vete, and so on and so forth. Many others. So if you look at their writings, they use this framework, the isolation to assimilation and integration. And largely it is the framework which is used in different policies and the programs in the post-independent nation state of India. And often we see, and often it is determined that these writings are before a famous sociologist called Khakha, who was well known, who is still well known professor of sociology, who was teaching in Delhi University sometime, in Nehu before that, and sometime teaching in TISS. And he started, in fact, in 1999. He published 2 articles, very interesting articles, and in his articles, some of these articles like transformation of tribes in India, terms of discourse, tribes as indigenous people of India, 1990. These 2 articles I find very interesting, published in EPW. So the writings before his writings, many of the scholars, and then Khakha starts writing in 90s, especially in later part of the 90s. He starts writing, which is a shift from the scholars. And that is why often some of the recent tribal Adivasi scholars are trying to say that before Khakha's writing, what is there, and with the Khakha's writings, what is the shift? There is a shift, because the Khakha himself, coming from tribal community, he tries to, and established sociologist, he tries to theorize from a tribal perspective. Being himself as a tribe, with his own lived experience, he comes up with an alternative argument. Okay, and what are those key issues and the points? The way the colonization or colonialism is conceptualized. Okay, so around his writings, he contests how we define colonization. Colonization not necessarily British colonization. Britishers came, went back. So very often we say that colonization ended with the independent India. But Khakhas say that there is colonization for tribes doesn't end there. Okay, so the colonization continues in different forms. And how we conceptualize colonization is an issue. And same way, the approach and framing of modernity is with reference to the caste, the dominant caste. And so that's what he says is problematic. Because one cannot define modernity in relation to another community. And the same thing has happened, modernity, when the Europeans or the British colonial imperialists, they went around to colonize different parts of the world. They tried to frame the communities with reference to their community, with reference to their Western perspective. In the same way, after the Britishers have gone back, the modernity in India gets defined in relation to the dominant caste society. Okay, that Khakar looks at problematic. And third point, he says that guiding principles and framework of governance, what is referred governance, something also can be relooked at when it comes to the tribes. And in the Constituent Assembly, one of the members of Constituent Assembly debates called Jaipal Singh, in the debate, he says that I think tribals need not be talked about governance. They don't need to be taught what is governance. Okay, it is better that one need to go to the tribes to learn about what is governance, because the kind of a governance, participatory governance they have traditionally, I think that maintains the egalitarianism, that maintains the sustainability, spirit of sustainability and participation. Okay, so the principles around which the present governance principles are framed with majoritarian decision-making process, something Khaka tries to question. And the way development was conceived and envisioned. Now, in the name of development, the kind of mass, large destructions happening in the tribal area, in the large industries, mines, industries, highways, the amount of tribals are becoming homeless, amount of landlessness, it is a problematic. So it looks like the development projects like land, the dams or industries, the mines is synonymous to displacement for the tribes. So the way developments are conceptualized is problematic. And last point is the whole problematic epistemology or the methodology of knowledge production. The framework, the methodology or the epistemology of the dominant is problematic. And universalization process of dominant is problematic. And so the knowledge production processes we have is problematic, which comes through in Khaka's writing. And that spirit and that ideas are drawn by many of the indigenous Adivasi scholars in India, and some of the recent writings I can share, like sociological research, methodologies in fields of practice. Recently, we have brought out in 2025, three of us have edited a volume. Then problematics of tribal integration with my colleague Bodhi and myself have brought it. Everyday state and development in Northeast. It just example that there are the counter narrative, counter argument coming up with the indigenous epistemology. The epistemology from the perspectives from the indigenous or the Adivasi or the tribal lenses. Okay, and that is why my colleague Bodhi in one of his writings say, in India, I talked about the alternative epistemology around the world coming. In India, the tribal and Adivasi epistemology, that is the epistemology around perspectives from within, is emerging. The perspective from the community. They're trying to counter argue that there is a lens, there is a worldview, there is a knowledge system within the tribal or in Adivasi communities also. They also have their own epistemology. Okay, and so this perspective from within is basically the tribal and Adivasi epistemology, which is articulated from their location, like the picture I showed about the 9 or 6. It is all depends on the location. Okay, based on the location, the whole reality changes. It is subjective, but what is important is the location becomes very, very crucial, and based on that location it gets defined whether it is 6 or 9. And so there is no absoluteness, it is based on relativeness. So it is for someone it is 6, but for someone else it is 9. So it is not absolute that it is 6 or 9, it is relative. And so not necessary that it has to be universal, it is based on the context. And this context which comes from the time, the person, and the space. At particular time, the people or the person who is there and the space, because very, very important. And so it is the time now and this place. Not there is a typing error. Here means this place here. Where am I standing? And at this time. Okay, that is very, very important. And so this context is always dynamic and not permanent. It is temporary. Okay, so how we see the world from the tribal perspective? It relies on the historical approach. Historical context become very, very important. And the systems approach. There is nothing is singular thing. There are multiplicities there. There are different structures are there. There are different sectors are there, whether it is social structure, whether it is different sectors like health, education, livelihood, whether it is rural, urban, tribal areas, whether it is personal or personality, whether it is psychological or physical reality. Okay, and based on that, there is ethics and aesthetics. This context provides what is ethics for me, or what is beauty for me. As we say, the beauty relies on the beholder's eye, because the way we use our lenses, I think beauty depends on that, and it is based on the commitment to free, prior, informed consent. When we collect information, it is with the free, prior, informed consent. We collect the information. We see that we make the people of the community working together in this knowledge building process. And so it is co-creation of knowledge, it is co-ownership of knowledge, and there is a consent of people. It is not like the researcher and the information provider. It is not like subjective and objective. Okay, they're the research object. Most of the time, as a researcher, when we go to the field, we use them as the research object. They're like a data. And based on that, we write our thesis. And the indigenous knowledge system is countering that. No, it has to have their consent, and they have to be the co-creator of this knowledge. It should not be extractive. As a researcher, often we use the extractive approach, and as they just become a data. And it changes the role reversal, behavior, relationship, and learning process. It is not to dominate and lecture, rather facilitate, learn from each other. Okay, so it is not necessarily transferring anything or giving them any gyan, but it is working together. It is expressing about each other's feelings, views, exchanging, and coming to certain kind of understanding and consistency. And so it is a framework shifting from isolationist to integration and assimilation towards adoption. It looks like the adoption, negotiation, and freedom from the perspective from the tribes. When the people, they feel they are isolated, that's where they have the freedom. Because they live the way they want to live. Nobody is decided, nobody imposes them, nobody determines that we are backward or primitive. And the more we see they're adopted, the larger dominant culture and way of life, that's where we see the assimilation happening. Okay, and researchers most of the time play the facilitators role, and that's why we see that people in this picture, we can see that people don't understand your perspective. Okay. And that's completely fine. Okay. People might laugh at you when you are collecting the water and filling up the water tank. So people might laugh that, okay, instead of holding the umbrella ulta, this fellow is collecting water other way, and probably halfway he's getting wet. Yeah. So with this, I will stop, and I will look forward to have your questions and counter argument and discussion, because we have to have discussions. As we are colleagues, we should not end saying that yes, whatever I said is the truth and whatever I said is absolute thing which you should accept it. Thank you. So can we, I think in the chat box there are something. Okay, there is some issue with regard to slides. But any question, if you can chat, if you can open your mic and ask, feel free to do that. At least somebody could also say that you don't agree with me on certain things. Anybody had any counter views, please? Or anything you want to share in this context?
My question to you is like, sir, how to protect this indigenous knowledge? Being a researcher, how do you think, sir, one researcher can preserve the various knowledges, especially when come to the India? We have a lot of indigenous knowledge in the rural areas. How can we protect it?
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Now, there are many projects are around documenting the indigenous knowledge system. Not only India, globally, people are trying to document the indigenous knowledge system. And many times, this knowledge system is largely in the form of songs, stories, in their practices, rituals. Okay, and these are with their own local languages or dialects. Now, unless we are able to document, and this is embedded with their local language, local traditions. So unless we are able to protect along with the knowledge, unless we are able to protect the language and the knowledge, both are very integrated. So if we are able to document and protect, preserve through documentation, and also see that how we can pass it on to the next generation. So first, it is important that we are able to document it with their own way, with their own participation, and also see that how we can pass it on to the next generation. I'm not saying that indigenous knowledge system is the ultimate. Somewhere we have to have integration of the so-called modern knowledge system and the indigenous knowledge system. So somewhere we have to bring them together and integrate or incorporate in our modern training or education systems. So there are many initiatives, and that's why UNESCO has this project of local and indigenous local knowledge system project. I'm working on a project which is around biodiversity, language and culture, and well-being. So we are trying to document the biodiversity, which is embedded with the local knowledge, and cultural practices, and which is connected with their own well-being, like medicines, food. There are many medicinal plants, many medicinal practices, many foods are there. Probably we do not know. Most of us, we do not know. It is there locally available. So unless we are able to document and put it in their own local language, probably people next generation forget it. So we have to start working on this. I mean, it all depends on, even in the government of India, many projects are being funded by the government of India now on this.
Sir, I have a question to ask.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I feel that see, we discussed about colonization and all, and how it affects indigenous knowledge and stuff. But then I'm concerned about like people are migrating. In fact, nowadays Indians are going and settling abroad, and majority in almost every houses. That's the thing. Now, is there any risk or of danger or losing our indigenous knowledge just because of migration?
Yeah. Absolutely. When the people migrate, they disconnect themselves from their own culture and environment, and we are very fast in adopting the new culture and new traditions. With the kind of first growing society in with this present generation, I think we are adapting fast to the new things. But unfortunately, we are missing out, losing out whatever our traditions or practices, both in terms of food systems, both in terms of our medicine values, different kind of plants, insects, flora and fauna. The whole our ecosystem, which were very sustainable. With the migration, somehow we are forgetting, leaving them behind and forgetting. And if you see in the villages now, how many of the rural villages are remaining with their own traditional occupations? Say, for example, agriculture. Now, gradually people are losing out the agriculture. And also you will see that they are losing out the traditional seeds. And we have now the high yielding varieties of seeds which are water intensive and very sensitive to the insects. So unless we have enough water, unless we have pesticides, it becomes very difficult to sustain this high yielding variety of seeds. But the seeds which we had in the villages, which were conducive to the local environment, local climatic conditions, somehow we have lost. And with that kind of food system, we are also inviting different kind of diseases, right? With the increasing amount of rice, which are modified seeds, we are continuously having increasing amount of carbohydrate. And there is a millet mission coming up nationally and internationally that we should have more and more millets. There is promotion of millet sitting now. Okay, millet used to be the poor man's food in my region. Today, millets is supposed to be the most expensive food. It is most expensive than basmati rice. Simple millet is cost in Mumbai. I'm in Mumbai. It will not cost less than 200 to 250 rupees per kg. Your basmati rice also doesn't cost that much. So the food which we had, somehow we have left, we have forgotten. And now the scientific community has identified that millet is the most nutritious food. Okay, so in one time we demolished that food systems and the knowledge system. Now we have realized that now we have to preserve it. So with the migration, definitely this kind of knowledge system we are going to forget, and getting into another knowledge system where fast food, we have to have more and more fast food in the towns and cities. You are free to share your examples or your experiences also, any findings, any research methodological questions if you have.